All right, Kevin, time to have some uncomfortable conversations, but these are important things for the church to know about. So we're going to talk about persecution in
Mm,
kind of keeping with the theme of the spiritual buffet material for this week.
right.
You and I have not suffered persecution as we normally think of it, as evidenced by the fact that both of our heads are still currently attached to our bodies
Exactly.
and nobody's ever thrown acid in our faces and so on. Um, we've been around the world, done some missions, met some people that bear the marks of Christ,
Yeah.
seen a couple of things, and God's been gentle with us so
Sure.
far. And anyway, the idea here is just to kind of maybe illuminate, share a couple of these stories for folks in the church, just to kind of maybe grasp the eminence of resistance to the Christian message that we don't have to see a whole lot of times. A lot of us
hmm
get the feeling it's kind of ramping up in the Western world. I think that's true personally. I think we see that, but we haven't seen it at its peak. So
Right.
you've been around, you've done mission work. I kind of popped into your office and just said, hey, you got any stories that would be helpful for people to know, maybe some lessons we could learn about persecution and so on. So what kind of stuff have you seen as far as resistance to the gospel and the servants of God specifically?
That's definitely a good question. Rather neglected topic. Yeah. Well, I have seen a few things. I experienced part of one thing, although it was mild and it was really divinely averted, actually, at the very last moment. But yeah, and interesting you bring up the persecution. First of all, there are lots of things that are called persecution that aren't. You know, like
Good point.
like
Yeah.
I'm teaching a Bible Institute right now through Zoom in Dominican Republic,
I'm
and
sure that's a piece of cake. That must be the easiest thing
yeah,
you've ever
it's
done.
just it's exactly what we prepared for. And I mean, the power going out in the middle of a Zoom Bible Institute is not persecution,
Right.
right?
Right.
Okay. So there's not that. So,
Yeah,
but
and somebody insulting you and saying you're stupid because you've got faith, I've got reason, and you're anti-intellectual. Now
right,
that's resistance. That's
sure.
you bear insults for the name of Christ, and that's in that same zone. But what we're kind of talking about here is it's a different league. It's JV versus varsity, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. There's an institutionalized going after and perhaps turning a blind eye to specifically to Christianity. Yeah, I mean a couple stories that are along those lines. Yeah, so in Uganda, there's a fellow I'll call Benny. He faced it, and of course we knew him. We heard his story firsthand, and he tells stories such as, "Hey, I became a Christian. I believed that Jesus was the only Messiah, the only way to the Father, and he believed it publicly, and his family kind of tolerated it, but they all went along with it until his baby, I can't remember if it was a girl or a boy, got really sick, and he said, 'We're going to pray.'" And the family, and when I say family, I mean the clan, right?
Hmm.
That everybody in the whole area, they're all connected in the same tribe, in the same part of the same tribe. And they're like, "Well, let's sacrifice the goat also." And he's like, "Can't do it."
Kind of
And
cover
they're
your
like, "This
bases,
is
sort
your
of thing.
yeah, this is your baby." He's like, "Look, I might have done that a couple years ago. I can't do that anymore. Jesus is the one we pray to. He's the one who answers prayer." And the persecution was that they kicked him out. That he lost his family. Like even his wife kicked him out, and the baby survived, and he attributed it to his prayer to Jesus. But the family kicked him out. So is that persecution? Yeah, I would call that. I'd
Yeah.
call that persecution. It was directly against him because of his stance on the name of Christ. A
And
different
Jesus
in
says
Western
that, by the way.
culture.
I didn't mean to cut you off here, but before we
No,
move on, I mean, Jesus says homes will be divided and
yeah,
nobody has lost their family members, but will receive back more, a hundredfold. So he really does lay the groundwork and puts that in the category of suffering for his namesake. That's
yeah.
exactly what that is.
That's exactly, and that's a good verse. Absolutely. So there's definitely no need to minimize that. That's a real gut punch. Um, but it's not just Africa, right? It's also, even when we were in Western Europe, there's a lady that we can call Irene. She was a nominal Catholic like everybody else in her city. Um, she she became pregnant. She and her husband were expecting their baby, and the husband wasn't happy about that, so he kicked her out, or he left. And so she went to the priest, her priest, and he said, this happened for a reason. You're at fault, not your husband.
Well,
And she's
like
like,
a divine
what?
retribution sort of thing.
Yeah. And he said, well, I happen to have good info that you have a Bible in your apartment. That's why all this is happening. You have a Bible in your apartment. Get rid of the Bible, and maybe your husband will come back.
All right, let me pump the brakes on that. So a Catholic priest says she was being punished by God for having a Bible.
Yep.
And the idea behind that is that you don't get to access the Bible; the clergy does it for you.
Right. Right.
Okay.
And the Reformation isn't over kind of thing. Exactly. The whole 15, 17, 95 theses and the indulgences, all that. Yeah. That.
Wow.
That. Right. Well, her story didn't end there. So she actually was infuriated by that move, and she didn't know the gospel yet, but she did know that there are some people who are connected to God that aren't Catholic. So she literally drove around the city looking for somebody with a fish symbol on the back of the car because she had heard that was a non-Catholic Christian symbol.
I got a plumber in my neighborhood I could hook her up with. He's got a fish symbol right next to the
She finds somebody,
logo.
goes in the supermarket, pulls her out, and says, "I need to talk to you." And she gets converted right there, I think, in the parking lot or soon after. And her pressure and even the priestly ostracism, I don't even know the right verbs about it. It ended up being toward her conversion. So was that persecution? She wasn't a Christian yet. Yeah, it's kind of strange,
Well, yeah. Where's the line between persecution and spiritual abuse, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The one time that I came closest to being persecuted, we were again back in Uganda in the very north at the edge of the Muslim territory. In fact, we were way over the end of the Muslim land. It was the kind of place that if you didn't go to prayers on Friday, they'd pull you out of your car and beat you, or they pull you out of your house and beat you up. So we were there, and we were there for a week. We didn't preach first. What we did first was we went around to different people, and we offered to help them, especially the elderly, help them to dig in their gardens, to weed, and to bring in crops. And we did that for a couple days. And one of the people we helped with the crops was an old fellow. They called him Muse, which just means a gray beard. He was one of the elders, right? He was one of the chieftains.
Okay.
We didn't know that, but we dug in his garden, and afterwards, he was a really neat old guy. His cane was a 9-iron.
All right.
He used it as a walking stick, a 9-iron. It was. I'm sure the last time he went golfing, he just kept it out.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, that was his walking stick. But he was so appreciative, and he even turned to me. And I'm not the leader of this group. This is all totally Ugandan thing. I'm just a participant. And he said, "I've never seen a white person sweat." And I said, "I sweat all the time," because I worked in his garden. He'd never seen somebody from the West work.
Got it. Okay.
Like
okay.
me.
I was like, every white person in Africa is sweating all the time. What's he talking about?
Constantly. Well, the persecution came when we finally got around to preaching. The community, they were gathering their rocks. They were told us that they're going to stone us or stone our equipment, not us to death necessarily, although that's not true, but particularly our equipment. And that guy, the chieftain, the Buze, he sent his personal guard to encircle us from his own people. Yeah.
And so this was I might have missed it, but this village was majority Muslim or paganism,
99%,
or what?
Yeah, 99%. There happened to be one kind of orphan care facility, but it was just a dot on the map.
Okay.
It was not at all like the southern part of that country, which is predominantly Christian. This was more like Sudan. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So he took care of you there, and
He did.
The Lord averted that one.
Yeah. I mean, those are the stories, and that's not the folks that we talk to, like in Nepal, for instance, when we were there, and they tell, "Hey, we became Christian, and they burned our house down. They ran us out of town. They threw acid isn't right, but they tried to definitely disfigure us. It's that kind of thing. And these people were in the Bible Institute at that point. They were trained to go back to those people that had shamelessly persecuted them. And it's like, we have the teacher student thing backwards here. You
Yeah.
should be up here teaching and I should be taking notes. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, when we're there teaching pastors, sometimes it's like, let's not call this pastor training. Let's call this information delivery. And then I'll learn
Right.
from you how to actually be faithful and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
I'm reaching way back into the vault here, but wasn't there something when you were in Nepal about like, there was a penalty for converting to Christianity, and it was something like 3 years in prison. And they just sort of had this tacit agreement among them that like, well, we'll take shifts, or they can't get us all. Or, I mean, it was something like that, but I'm not remembering it completely.
Yeah, it's exactly right. They had just passed a law making the public expression, and particularly evangelistic expression of Christianity, illegal in the country. And the Christians, I mean, I was literally teaching missions and evangelism that very week. And they're like, yeah, right on. They can't get us all. And it was like, yeah, this is just Tuesday. Carry on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So as far as it's probably impossible to pinpoint, but just as far as the main lessons that that our church, let's just talk about Grace and Truth. You come back from trips like that or whatever, and I mean, what is it that Grace and Truth needs to know, or what lessons do we need to take away from those types of situations? How can we grow from their work?
Something we can learn from their work, their view of adversity is so much different than ours. If we could borrow a mindset or an attitude, I think that would be the thing. They view it as normal. They view particularly targeted adversity, if not into the realm of persecution, certainly into the realm of neglect or marginalization or disenfranchisement or whatever. They view that as, okay, we're not surprised by that. That's within the scope of being okay.
Yeah, it's like I've almost noticed this this attitude. I don't know if I'm articulating this correctly, so you can fix this for me. But it's like there's these assumptions from every culture brings its own assumptions to the scriptures, right?
Sure.
And when we read of the suffering of Christ, the suffering of the apostles, and so on in the New Testament, we say, "Wow, things were really bad back then," right? And in our best moments, we're very thankful for all of those guys and the suffering, the blood that they put in, and we understand that we benefit from it, right? But we think it was bad back then. And those that are suffering will read that and say, yep, like you're saying, this is Christianity, this is normal, and it's different when it fits with their experience. Am I kind of dancing around the right fire there?
No, I think that's very right. Very, very much so. They're much more comfortable at the threshold of life and death. They've been living in the shadow of the valley of death a lot longer and a lot deeper than we have in our comfort. And they have skills and depth of wisdom that the universal church needs. And so, yeah, there's absolutely, they're the ones that I want to learn from.
Yeah. And I mean, you touch on this. I wonder what things they can perceive about God's word that they have access to, because he's brought them up to that place where, when Paul writes a letter from prison, he's enduring things and writing a joyous letter like Ephesians in the middle of suffering like that, or Colossians, right. I mean, whatever it is. And so there's something that he's tapping into that they have been brought to, or much closer to, or something like that. So you got to wonder what types of perception they have that we've just never been forced to develop. And that in itself is desirable, right? Like we don't pray for persecution, but I mean, honestly, like I said, in our better moments, we don't shy away from it either. And it's because there are these spiritual, these relational benefits. I mean, there's something to it that makes what they have enviable in some sense.
Absolutely. There's something like, hey, this has a gift to give us. We don't know what it is yet. We'll only figure it out as we persevere through the end of it. This is going to be within the recipe that's going to produce something good. And that is a fantastically wise perspective. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing some stories, and we'll do another one of these, and we'll flip the roles here, and I'll share a couple of stories, and you can tell us what we're going to learn from those.
Fantastic.
All right, thanks, Kevin.